Hey, Meg.
Hey.
We did it. We're back. Time of the recording, Super Bowl Sunday. They already know who the champions are. It's weird to think that they're listening. They're like, oh, what are you talking about Super Bowl? It happened yesterday. We should play some fun bets. You in?
Nah.
Yeah?
You can do it.
We can do it. Just like the Your Town podcast. This one's going to check it off. The list. We got another one off the list. South Carolina. You've been to South Carolina.
I have.
The old Turtle Beach.
Mm-hmm.
What'd you think of it? You liked it, right? You're a fan of the old Myrtle Beach? Or
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah. Been once, twice, multiple times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times?
Once there.
What is it with us northern New Yorkers that we all flock to Myrtle Beach?
I've only been once.
You think it's just good marketing? Because it was always a thing like spring break, midwinter break. It was like everybody in this area, at least, all went down there. And it was like everybody from Myrtle Beach abandoned for a couple of weeks and just let the old pale vitamin D lacking northern New Yorkers into their state.
Probably because it's closer.
Than Florida.
And warmer.
Yeah. I always thought Virginia Beach would be a nice one, but that's a toughie on spring break. I think they're not like super warm. But either way, in this Your Town episode, we're heading to South Carolina. We're going to dive pretty deep. Maybe not super deep, but like we're not in the kiddie pool anymore. We're approaching the deep end where you can, jump off the diving board into one of, if not the most chilling and overlooked cases in South Carolina's history. The disturbing story of Larry Gene Bell, a man whose name is forever tied to the tragic murders of 2 young girls and whose twisted crimes sent shockwaves through the Midlands of South Carolina. Ugh. Viewer and listener discretion advised. As always, I try to remember to say that. And I do try to tone back the gruesome details. Nobody really needs those, do they?
Nah.
Nah, they're not needed. Do you want to do the intro, or should we do the next little segment, you think?
Intro.
Intro, you think?
Yeah.
When?
No.
We did it, Meg. That was perfect timing. I was pretty prepared.
Mm-hmm.
That should be on my headstone someday. Matt lays here. He was pretty prepared sometimes.
Yeah. It's a good line.
Write that down. But before we get into the dark details of old Larry Gene Bell and his disturbing journey, I want us just to pause for a second and picture this. All right, you picturing this, Meg?
Mm-hmm.
All right, it's South Carolina. It's in the early 1980s. We're not on this planet yet, at least in this dimension. It's the heart of the South, where the slow pace of life and a warm breeze seems to make the world feel calm and safe. Small towns with tight-knit communities, historic churches, and front porches where neighbors wave hello to each other. Sounds familiar, huh? Sounds like it could be up here.
Could be.
Seems kind of nice.
Mm-hmm.
But just beneath the surface of the seemingly serene place, a series of horrific crimes were about to unfold. A series that would change the town of Columbia and the entire state of South Carolina forever. And seems to be the latest ones and we try to find small towns, you know what I mean? And seems to be a lot of just small town, tight-knit community, big tragedy. And it doesn't just happen in big cities. It happens everywhere. We all have little tragedies that happen in each of our small towns. Mm-hmm. This is another one, just from back in the day. So I had an idea the other day. Well, hopefully you like it. But I said, what if people don't listen all the way to the end? They're going to miss Meg's quote. So we're mixing it up. We're doing the quote and then kicking this thing off. So what do you think?
Okay.
You ready for it?
Sure.
All right, let's do the thing.
Sometimes it's not the monsters under the bed we need to be afraid of, but the ones who walk among us.
Right, that's pretty fitting for this episode, right?
We'll find out.
We will find out. All right. Should we do this?
Mm-hmm.
All right. If I remember, I'm going to put a sound effect in here right now. It's going to be like wind blowing through the trees. What would it sound like, Meg? picture Columbia, South Carolina, a small but thriving city surrounded by rolling hills with an air that carries the scent of magnolia trees and southern charm. Did you picture that?
Mm-hmm.
Like the smell of magnolia trees?
Don't know.
Me neither. I was just trying to think what that smelled like. I'm here. I'm picturing. I can see the hills. I got the air blowing because we went. I can't picture the magnolia. What do you think it smells like?
I have no idea.
Should we ask my new friend?
Sure.
All right. Hey, new friend. You've been on the Triple D podcast, Stay Out of My Fridge podcast, the Body Wrong podcast. You've been everywhere. But guess what? Now you're on the Yore podcast, me and Meg, and we're hanging out. We want to know what the scent of a magnolia tree sounds like. Smells like.
The scent of a magnolia tree is like stepping into a sweet floral wonderland. It's got a rich, creamy aroma with hints of lemon and a touch of sweetness. It's like nature's own perfume, just waiting to whisk you away.
Wow, easy, ladies. It's AI. I don't want you to get whisked away in his voice. What a stud. All right, now I'm there. Lemony, nature's perfume.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Copper Johns, if you're listening, we need a scent of magnolia beard oil. You in?
Mm-hmm.
You'd rock it?
Yeah.
Heck yeah. All right, so we got that southern charm going on in this town. It's the place where time moves slow. And the biggest concerns are usually college football season or which family is hosting the next big potluck dinner. Columbia, like many towns in the Midlands, carries an air of calmness, even when you're driving through the rural outskirts. All right, let's do a rural road hum softly in the background. I don't know how to do that. But either way, let's go to 1985. Heck of a year. But unfortunately, the calm was shattered. In the small town atmosphere, people thought they knew each other well. Neighbors would stop by for a quick chat. Kids played in the yards without a second thought. And the local gas station was the hub of gossip. Not just the water coolers, but in the shadows, a monster was preparing to strike. The first tragedy to strike was the disappearance of Sharon Faye Smith. She was only 17 years old. From Platte Springs Road is where they resided in South Carolina. She disappeared without a trace on May 31st, 1985. It was a quiet summer evening, and the Whitehead family lived in a modest, quiet neighborhood. Chandra had been spending the afternoon hanging out with her friends. Her mother called her in for dinner, but Chandra, she didn't return. They searched for her. They did find her car. It was abandoned at the curb, right at the mailbox. Over the next few days, Belle called the Smith family regularly from a payphone to tell them that Smith was fine and then would taunt them. In fact, they ended up finding out that she was likely killed within 12 hours of her abduction. But this wasn't just another missing persons case. Her disappearance would soon be linked to another case that had been haunting the Midlands for weeks. There was then the disappearance of Deborah May Helmick, a 9-year-old from nearby on the old Percival Road. Both girls had gone missing under eerily similar circumstances. Authorities quickly realized they were dealing with something far more sinister than the typical abduction. Isn't that crazy? I know we kind of went through that pretty quickly. He abducted the girls and then constantly called the family from a payphone and taunted them. On top of the tragedy itself, then you're getting taunted by the killer.
It's horrible.
What a monster. So, obviously, the investigation then begins immediately, but there were no immediate leads, no witnesses, no signs of forced entry into the homes, and there was just no clear motive. It was as if these two girls had just vanished into thin air. The police, they're struggling, and the public was, well, terrified. Parents kept their children close. They started to lock the doors and the windows. Church bells rang more frequently as people prayed for the safe return of the missing girls. Then, just a few weeks later, a breakthrough, I guess, if that's what you want to call it. But it wasn't a good one, and it wasn't one that anyone hoped. They find Sharon's body in Saluda County, South Carolina, after Belle called the Smith family and gave them directions right to her remains. Deborah May Helmick was killed, and again, they continued to call the family and taunt and tunt and tunt. But who was this man? Where could he be hiding? The people of South Carolina were on edge. Rightfully so. Townspeople, they couldn't fathom the reality that the killer could just be someone that they pass in the streets every single day. Someone who had the ability to blend into the background, to disappear into their own community.
And he called both families and told them where the bodies were?
That's what, yeah. Taunted, and then finally. But while this is all going on, Bell's just out there, playing a game with the police, playing a game with the press, playing a game with the families. The phone calls were just a part of the twisted need for attention. He was a man who on the outside seemed to be just another quiet, harmless member of the community. But he was an ex-Marine, and he actually got discharged from the Marines for a knee injury that he suffered while he was cleaning a gun and accidentally shot himself. He had no criminal record that anyone knew of, and his behavior, it didn't raise any red flags. He worked for the Department of Corrections in Columbia for a month before he ended up moving with his family. No one suspected that he was capable of such monstrous acts. But obviously beneath the surface, there was a different story. Bell, he was hiding something much darker. It was an obsession with control, a need for power, and a disturbing ability to manipulate those around him. Bell was living a double life, hiding in plain sight as a man with a wife, a daughter, and a history of disturbing behavior. But those are the two victims we know of. They think that the first known victim could have been on November 18, 1984, a Sandy Elaine Cornett. She was 26, and they think that he attacked her. She was last seen leaving her house about 6:30 p.m. in Charlotte, North Carolina. The following day, when she failed to show up for work, her neighbor reported her missing. The main suspect in Sandy's disappearance was Bell, who was reportedly her previous boyfriend's coworker at Charlotte Douglas International Airport. I think we went there once, and had attended a party at her house. He obviously denied abducting and killing her, but made statements, including drawing a map that was suggested where her body was buried. But just like many cases back in the early 80s, it was just kind of swept under the rug by authorities. It was dismissed as just an isolated incident. And then he was also suspected of the disappearance of a 21-year-old Denise Newsom Porch, who was last seen in Charlotte, North Carolina, July 31st, 1975. 7 years after her disappearance in 82, her family had her proclaimed legally dead. Bell's a potential suspect in that one as well, as he was a former electrician who in 1975 resided only about 300 yards away from the Yorktown apartments where she worked as a manager. He was never again formally charged in connection with her disappearance. That's 4, Meg. And during the largest manhunt in South Carolina history, Bell made 8 telephone calls to the Smith family, often speaking with Sherry's sister, Dawn. During one of his phone calls with Dawn, he accidentally let it slip that all he wanted to do was make love to Dawn. Instead of all I wanted to do was make love with Sherry. Dawn and Sherry did have a striking resemblance, and so it is thought that he mistook Sherry for Dawn. And the fixation for Dawn only grew as time passed, and he made many more calls. That's got to be tough, too. Not only you lose your sister, but then to find out that you were the target. Isn't there that thing like, not the karma, that's not the right word, but there's like a special term for when you kind of escape death or something, like Travis Barker on the airplane.
Yeah.
I forget what it is, but man, that's a toughness on an even tougher thing. That's unbelievable. And then during one of Bell's call, he gave exact directions to the locations of both the bodies and described to the family how he actually did the gruesome things. June 27, 1985, he's arrested after forensics was able to find kind of some evidence and some stuff after an incomplete phone number on the stationery of the letter that was sent to the Smith family. Filling in the missing digits led the Federal Bureau of Investigation to a couple who hired Bell for some work and had him house sit for them while they were away. 6 hairs microscopically similar to Sherry Smith's hair were then found in Bell's apartment. During 6-hour testimony at his trial, Bell continuously blurted out bizarre comments and carried on non-stop theatrics, rambling just on and refusing to answer questions. You know why he was doing that, Meg?
Hmm.
He was trying to fake a mental illness so he could get a more lenient sentence. This is where I'd put in the old jail cell door slamming shut. How was that?
That's good.
Yeah. Bell's trial was a spectacle in itself. Like I said, he behaved in a pretty bizarre manner, offering no remorse for his crimes. His testimony filled with odd ramblings, and he insisted he had no real recollection of his actions. But in the end, Meg, Larry Gene Bell was convicted for the brutal murders and was sentenced to death. On October 4th, 1996, after spending 11 years on death row, Larry Gene Bell was executed by electric chair, which he chose over lethal injection. You know what his final words were, Meg?
What?
Nothing. He had no final words.
Hmm.
Yeah. And there was actually no more electric chair executions in the state until 2004, when James Neal Tucker was executed for the double murders of Rosa Oakley and Shannon Lynn Millen. Yeah. Unbelievable, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Got anything else?
No.
All right, so as we end today's episode, we want you to reflect on how much we really know about the people around us. How well do we truly know our neighbors? Well, for our sake, pretty good. How well do we know our colleagues or the people that we interact with every day? Larry Gene Bell, he hid in plain sight, like so many others do before they show their true, terrifying nature. But sometimes there's more lurking beneath the surface, more than we ever suspect.
I didn't know they could choose their way of execution.
I didn't either. I don't know if it was an older thing or maybe it was a South Carolina thing. But you know who might know? Our British correspondent. If you are on death row, do you get to choose your way of being executed?
In some places, inmates do have a choice between a few methods. It depends on the state's laws and regulations. It's not a universal practice, though. Ooh, this is a fascinating thing to explore.
Wow. You see how excited he got? I'm going to explore this. Maybe in a future episode, we will have to dive into this deeper. But again, this was a good one. And I can't thank everybody for listening. Meg, for joining me in the studio again. Let's go have ourselves a day, huh?
All right.
Did you hear that? The hot tub's calling. We should probably answer it.
Okay.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right. Your Townians, we'll be back next week. Hopefully you enjoyed it. As always, though, if there's something you want us to cover, a state, a story, let us know. We'd love to dig in deep to something that happened in your small town, big town, little town. Sounds like a country song. But either way, we'll be back next week. And that's all I got. Okay. Bye.
Bye.